Vanessa Mitchell, 35, stared at the email from her sister Diana, reading it twice to make sure she understood. After 10 years of estrangement, following their grandmother's inheritance dispute, her family had excluded her from their annual reunion. The pain was familiar but still sharp. They had no idea that after struggling alone, her art career had finally flourished. Now she owned Mitchell Mansion, the ancestral home they could never afford. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if family drama gets your attention. The last happy family reunion Vanessa remembered was 10 years ago, when she was 25. Her grandmother Eleanor was celebrating her 80th birthday at the family lake house, a modest but charming property that had hosted Mitchell gatherings for generations. The scent of pine trees mixed with her mother Martha's famous apple pie created an atmosphere of nostalgia and warmth that summer day. Grandmother Eleanor had always been Vanessa's biggest supporter. While her father Richard constantly pushed her toward the family accounting firm, Eleanor saw something different in her granddaughter. "You have a gift, Vanessa," she would say, examining the sketchbook Vanessa always carried. These hands were meant to create beauty, not balance ledgers. That day at the lake house, while everyone was busy preparing for the party, Eleanor had taken Vanessa aside to the small dock overlooking the water. "I want to show you something," Eleanor said, pulling an envelope from her cardigan pocket. Inside was a brochure for the prestigious Hudson Art Institute in New York. "They have a special program for emerging artists. I think you should apply." Vanessa's heart raced as she flipped through the glossy pages. "Grandma, this is my dream school, but Dad would never allow it." Eleanor's eyes, the same deep brown as Vanessa's, narrowed with determination. "Your father means well, but he doesn't understand that not everyone is meant for the same path. Promise me you'll apply." That conversation gave Vanessa the courage to finally stand up to her father. 1 week after the birthday celebration, she laid the application on the dining room table during Sunday dinner. "What is this nonsense?" Richard Mitchell's voice boomed across the table. His thick fingers crumpled the edges of the application. "We have discussed this, Vanessa. You will complete your business degree and join the firm like your brother and sister." Diana, 2 years older than Vanessa, shot her a smug look. She had followed their father's plan perfectly, graduating with honors and already working her way up in the family business. Christopher, their younger brother by 3 years, stared at his plate, avoiding the confrontation as usual. "Richard, perhaps we should listen to what Vanessa wants," Martha said softly, but her suggestion wilted under her husband's glare. "I am applying to art school, Dad," Vanessa stated firmly. "This is my passion, and Grandma Eleanor believes in me." Her father's face reddened. "So, that's what this is about. Your grandmother has been filling your head with nonsense again. Art doesn't pay bills, Vanessa. This family has worked too hard building our reputation to have a daughter who wastes her life on finger paintings." The argument escalated until Richard delivered his ultimatum. "If you choose this path, you choose it alone. Don't expect a dime from me." That night, Vanessa called her grandmother in tears. Eleanor's response was immediate. "Apply to the school, my darling. Don't worry about the money. I'll take care of everything." True to her word, when Vanessa received her acceptance letter, Eleanor provided the tuition for her first semester. "This is your future," she told Vanessa. "Follow your heart, and the rest will fall into place." But 3 months later, just as Vanessa was settling into her new life in New York, Eleanor suffered a sudden stroke. Vanessa rushed home for the funeral, grief-stricken and lost without her greatest supporter. The reading of the will brought the final fracture in the family. Eleanor had left Vanessa a substantial inheritance, specifically to fund her education and launch her art career. The rest of the estate was divided among the family, but Richard, Diana, and even Christopher looked at Vanessa as if she had stolen from them. "You manipulated a dying old woman," Diana accused during the tense gathering at the attorney's office. She wasn't thinking clearly after her stroke. The changes to the will were made months before her illness, the attorney, Harold Jenkins, clarified. Mrs. Mitchell was of sound mind and very specific about her wishes. Richard's face had turned to stone. "You turn my mother against her own family. I don't know who you are anymore." Vanessa tried to explain that she had never asked for the money, that it had been Eleanor's decision, but no one would listen. When she returned to her childhood home to gather her belongings, her mother couldn't meet her eyes. "Your father needs time," Martha whispered, folding Vanessa's sweaters with trembling hands. "Just give him time." But time only seemed to harden the rift. Vanessa returned to New York alone, heartbroken but determined to honor her grandmother's faith in her. Those first years were brutally difficult. Vanessa found a tiny apartment in Brooklyn that she shared with 2 other students. She worked as a barista in the mornings, a gallery assistant on weekends, and took commissions for portrait sketches whenever she could. Some nights, she was so exhausted she fell asleep with her clothes on, her hands still stained with charcoal or paint. The turning point came during her second year, when renowned artist Catherine Morrison visited the institute. Catherine paused longest in front of Vanessa's work, a series of fragmented family scenes that seemed to break and reassemble across the canvas. "You understand pain," Catherine said, her eyes never leaving the paintings. "And more importantly, you understand how to transform it." Under Catherine's mentorship, Vanessa began to find her voice as an artist. Her work, deeply personal yet universally resonant, gradually attracted attention in small galleries around the city. By the time she graduated, Vanessa had secured representation with a respected gallery in Chelsea. Over the next 7 years, Vanessa built her career painting by painting, exhibition by exhibition. She created works that explored themes of family, belonging, rejection, and redemption. Critics noted the emotional depth in her pieces, the way she captured the complexity of human relationships with both brutality and tenderness. Last year, her collection titled Family Fragments sold out at a major gallery opening. The New York Times Review called her a powerful new voice examining the mythology of American family life. Overnight, Vanessa Mitchell became not just financially successful, but critically acclaimed. When she learned that the historic Mitchell mansion in her hometown was for sale, Vanessa recognized the irony immediately. The grand old house had belonged to a distant branch of the family generations ago, before financial troubles forced them to sell. Her father had often driven past it during her childhood, telling stories about their illustrious ancestors who had once lived there. "One day, when the firm grows enough, perhaps we'll bring it back into the family," he would say, though everyone knew it was just a dream. Now, with the proceeds from her last exhibition, Vanessa could make that dream reality, though not in the way her father had imagined. The purchase gave her a strange sense of coming full circle, of honoring both her ancestry and her grandmother's faith in her. After settling into the mansion, Vanessa found herself thinking about her family more and more. 10 years had passed, and though the annual family reunion had continued without her, she wondered if perhaps enough time had healed the wounds. Using her new address on the elegant stationery she had commissioned for the house, Vanessa sent invitations to her parents, Diana, Christopher, and several aunts, uncles, and cousins. "Please join me for a special gathering at Mitchell Mansion," she wrote. "I would be honored to host this year's family reunion and reconnect after too much time apart." As she dropped the invitations in the mail, Vanessa felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps now, with the evidence of her success surrounding them, her family would finally understand that her path, though different, had been the right one for her. Perhaps now they could rebuild what had been broken. 2 weeks passed with no responses to her invitations. Vanessa checked her mailbox daily, hoping for at least one RSVP, even a rejection. The silence was worse than an outright no, leaving her in a limbo of uncertainty and rekindled hope. One evening, while scrolling through social media, Vanessa paused on a post from her cousin Jessica. The image showed a large group gathered on the deck of a lake house, drinks raised in a toast. She recognized the location immediately as Uncle Thomas's summer place, the alternate venue for family gatherings when her grandmother's house became too small. The caption read, "Annual Mitchell Family Reunion. So blessed to have everyone together again." Everyone. The word stung as Vanessa zoomed in on the photo, identifying her parents, Diana with her husband, Christopher looking taller than she remembered, aunts, uncles, cousins, and even friends of the family, she had grown up knowing. Everyone except her. She was still staring at the image when her phone pinged with an email notification from Diana. Vanessa's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "Vanessa, I saw that you sent invitations for a reunion at your new house. I should explain that we already had plans for our annual gathering at Uncle Thomas's place. To be honest, we thought it would be uncomfortable for everyone if you were included, given the history. Also, buying Mitchell Mansion seems obviously like you're trying to show off your success or make some kind of point. We would appreciate it if you would respect our family traditions and privacy going forward. Diana." The email brought back the memory of her last day in the family home with painful clarity. Her father standing in the foyer, his face rigid with anger as she carried her suitcases down the stairs. "As far as I'm concerned, you are dead to me," he had said, his voice eerily calm. "You chose money over family loyalty. That's not what Mitchells do." Her mother had stood behind him, tears streaming down her face, but she said nothing to defend her daughter. Diana had passed by on her way to the kitchen, whispering, "How could you?" as if Vanessa had committed some unforgivable crime. Christopher had been the worst, though. He had watched from the top of the stairs, his face a mask of confusion and hurt, but he had remained silent, neither condemning nor supporting her. Now, reading Diana's email, Vanessa felt physically ill. The room seemed to spin slightly, and she had to put down her phone and bend forward, taking deep breaths to combat the wave of nausea. After 10 years, nothing had changed. They still saw her as the villain in their family story. The doorbell rang, startling her from her spiral of painful memories. Rachel Turner, her best friend since art school, stood on the porch with a bottle of wine and a sympathetic smile. "I was in the neighborhood for a client meeting and thought I'd surprise you," Rachel said, then frowned as she took in Vanessa's pale face. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." The tears Vanessa had been holding back broke free as she showed Rachel the email and the social media post. Rachel guided her to the living room sofa, opened the wine, and poured generous glasses for both of them. "They're still punishing you," Rachel said after reading Diana's message. "And they're doing it because they can't handle that you succeeded without them." "Maybe buying this house was a mistake," Vanessa admitted, looking around at the high ceilings and original moldings she had fallen in love with. "Was I trying to prove something? To rub my success in their faces?" "You bought this house because you loved it and because you could," Rachel said firmly. "Your success isn't about them, even if they want to make it so." Vanessa led Rachel through the mansion, showing her the rooms she had carefully prepared for family members who never intended to come. The guest room with the blue wallpaper that would have been perfect for her parents. The smaller room with excellent natural light where Diana's teenage daughter could have stayed. The den she had imagined Christopher enjoying, with its wall of bookshelves and comfortable leather chairs. "All this space, and it's just me," Vanessa said softly, standing in the grand dining room where she had envisioned a family dinner that would never happen. Rachel studied her friend for a long moment, then smiled slowly. "What if, instead of waiting for them to accept your invitation, you used this beautiful space for something else? You've been talking about hosting an exhibition outside the gallery system. Why not here?" The suggestion sparked something in Vanessa. "A home exhibition in the Mitchell Mansion, but completely on my terms." "Exactly," Rachel nodded enthusiastically. "You don't need their approval to create your own celebration." That night, after Rachel left, Vanessa sat in the study that had once belonged to some distant Mitchell patriarch. She reread Diana's email, noting the dismissive tone, the assumption that she was showing off, the complete lack of interest in reconnecting. For a moment, she considered writing a response filled with all the hurt and anger of the past decade, but something stopped her. There was more to this story than she knew. The bitterness in Diana's words, the collective decision to exclude her, the continued resentment over the inheritance, all suggested that the narrative her family believed was significantly different from reality. If she wanted to truly understand what had happened and possibly find some resolution, she needed more information. The realization didn't erase the pain of being excluded once again, but it gave Vanessa a sense of purpose. If her family wouldn't come to her willingly, perhaps she needed to change her approach. Not by giving up, but by finding a way to confront the past directly, with evidence rather than just emotion. The attic of Mitchell Mansion was filled with the original owner's antique furniture and trunks, which Vanessa had been gradually sorting through since moving in. Now, with renewed purpose, she climbed the narrow stairs to retrieve the box of her grandmother's keepsakes she had stored there. Eleanor's possessions had been divided according to her will, but many personal items had been deemed of no value by the family and were set to be donated. Vanessa had rescued these treasures, unable to bear the thought of her grandmother's memories being dispersed among strangers. Among the items was a small wooden box with Eleanor's monogram inlaid in mother of pearl. Vanessa had tried to open it when she first received it, but the tiny lock had held fast, and she hadn't wanted to damage the beautiful craftsmanship. Now, she examined it more closely, noticing a small key taped to the bottom that she had somehow missed before. With trembling fingers, Vanessa inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open, revealing a collection of letters, legal documents, and a small leather journal. She carried everything downstairs to the study and began to read. The journal entries dated back several years, documenting Eleanor's thoughts about the family business and her concerns about Richard's management style. Vanessa was shocked to read her grandmother's assessment of her father's financial decisions. Richard continues to expand too quickly, one entry read. I've advised caution, but he dismisses my concerns as old-fashioned thinking. The Mitchell firm has survived for 3 generations by being conservative with investments, but Richard seems determined to make his mark with risky ventures. Another entry, dated just before Vanessa had announced her intention to attend art school, was even more revealing. Richard came to me today about changing my will. He wants everything to go to the business, claiming it's what William would have wanted. But my late husband knew the value of diversification better than anyone. I won't allow our entire legacy to be gambled on Richard's ambitious expansion plans. The most painful discovery was a letter Eleanor had written specifically addressing the changes to her will, apparently meant to be read after her death. To my dear family, I have made the decision to set aside a portion of my estate specifically for Vanessa's education and career in the arts. This is not a reflection of greater affection for her, but recognition of her unique path. Richard, Diana, and Christopher have the security of the family business, while Vanessa has chosen a more uncertain road that nonetheless honors the creative spirit that has always been part of the Mitchell legacy. My father was an architectural designer before the Depression forced him into more practical work, a dream deferred that I do not wish to see repeated in my granddaughter. Please respect that this decision was made with love for all of you and with clear mind and spirit. The letter had never been shared with the family. Instead, Vanessa realized they had been allowed to believe she had somehow manipulated her grandmother, poisoning their perception of her for a decade. Among the documents was correspondence between Eleanor and attorney Harold Jenkins discussing Richard's financial requests and her concerns about the stability of the family firm even then. One note from Harold warned, if current trajectories continue, the business may face significant challenges within 5 to 7 years. Vanessa sat back in the leather chair, stunned by these revelations. Her grandmother had foreseen both her need for independent support and her father's potential business troubles years ago. The inheritance hadn't been favoritism, but a calculated decision to ensure at least one branch of the family would remain financially stable if Richard's risky business strategies failed. The next morning, Vanessa called Harold Jenkins, who was surprised but pleased to hear from her. Vanessa Mitchell, it's been quite some time. How can I assist you? I found some documents of my grandmother's, Vanessa explained. They suggest she was concerned about my father's business decisions, and that's partly why she structured her will as she did. Harold was silent for a moment. I'm limited in what I can discuss due to attorney-client privilege, even after your grandmother's passing. However, I can confirm that your father contested the will vigorously, claiming undue influence on your part. The court found no evidence to support his claims, which is why the inheritance was distributed according to your grandmother's wishes. Did you ever share her letter explaining her decisions with my family? Vanessa asked. I attempted to, Harold replied carefully. Your father refused to read it, and your mother deferred to his wishes, as did your siblings. I have it on file, if you'd like a copy. After speaking with Harold, Vanessa spent the afternoon researching her family online. LinkedIn revealed that her father had left the Mitchell accounting firm 3 years ago, with no explanation for the career change. Diana's profile listed her as working for a different company entirely, a mid-sized accounting firm in a neighboring city. The family business was not mentioned anywhere. A quick search of real estate listings confirmed her growing suspicion. The Mitchell family home, where she had grown up, was on the market, listed as price reduced, suggesting it had been for sale for some time, without success. Christopher's social media, normally filled with positive updates about work and friends, had shifted in tone over the past year. His latest post read, "Sometimes a fresh start is the only way forward. Letting go of the past to embrace new possibilities." As Vanessa pondered these discoveries, her email notification chimed. Diana again, but with a completely different tone from her previous message. "Vanessa, I've been thinking about our family situation, and I believe it might be beneficial for us to meet and discuss some financial matters that affect all of us. Perhaps we could have coffee next week? Let me know if you're available. Diana." The transparency of the request was almost insulting. After a decade of silence and exclusion, now that the family appeared to be in financial trouble, Diana suddenly wanted to discuss financial matters. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the hurt they had caused, just a thinly veiled attempt to access the wealth they had resented her for receiving. Vanessa forwarded the email to Catherine Morrison, her mentor, who had become a close friend over the years. Catherine's response was immediate and direct. Classic toxic family dynamics. They rejected you when you needed them, and now they want to benefit from your success without admitting they were wrong. Whatever you decide, protect yourself first. The pain of this realization cut deeper than the reunion exclusion. Her family saw her not as a person to reconnect with, but as a potential solution to their problems. They valued what she could give them, not who she was or what she had accomplished. That night, Vanessa sat alone in her grandmother's former bedroom, which she had converted into her home studio. The walls were lined with her paintings, a visual journey of her evolution as an artist. She studied them, seeing in each one elements of her struggle to understand her family's rejection and her own identity apart from them. A plan began to form in her mind. If her family wanted to approach her for financial reasons, she would meet them on her terms, with the full truth laid bare. No more hoping for a natural reconciliation, no more waiting for them to recognize her value. It was time to confront the past with all the evidence she now possessed, and force them to see not only her success, but the reality of what had truly happened 10 years ago. Over the next week, Vanessa transformed Mitchell Mansion into a strategic setting for family confrontation. She selected key pieces from her art collection and arranged them throughout the first floor, creating a visual timeline of her career achievements. In the grand foyer hung her first sold painting, a small but powerful piece that had earned her recognition at a student exhibition. The living room featured works from her breakthrough series that had established her reputation in the New York art scene. The dining room showcased her most recent pieces, the ones that had finally brought financial success and critical acclaim. In the study, Vanessa carefully arranged her grandmother's letters, journal entries, and legal documents on the antique desk. She made copies of everything, organizing them chronologically to tell the story her family had refused to hear 10 years ago. Instead of responding directly to Diana's email, Vanessa sent formal invitations to her parents, Diana and Christopher. The elegant cards read, "Your presence is requested at Mitchell Mansion to discuss an important family matter regarding grandmother Eleanor's estate. Dinner will be served." She included her phone number but not her email, forcing them to call if they wanted to decline. To her unsurprised satisfaction, all 4 family members RSVP'd within 24 hours, agreeing to attend. "They're coming for the money," Rachel observed when Vanessa told her about the plan. "Are you sure you're ready to face them all at once?" "I've been preparing for this moment for 10 years, Vanessa replied. "I just didn't know it." The day before the gathering, Catherine Morrison arrived to provide moral support and help Vanessa rehearse what she wanted to say. Remember, you control this narrative now, Catherine advised as they walked through the arranged rooms. They'll try to make you feel guilty, to diminish your success, to reassert the family hierarchy with your father at the top. Don't let them. The evening of the dinner, Rachel and Vanessa's boyfriend Daniel Matthews helped with final preparations. Daniel, a curator she had met through her gallery 2 years ago, understood the significance of this confrontation. Just remember, no matter what happens with them, you have people who love you for exactly who you are, he said, squeezing her hand before departing to give her space for the family reunion. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Vanessa took a deep breath, smoothed her simple but elegant black dress, and opened the door to face her past. Richard and Martha Mitchell stood on the porch, both looking noticeably older than Vanessa remembered. Her father's confident posture remained, but his hair had grayed completely, and deep lines bracketed his mouth. Her mother seemed smaller somehow, her shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying an invisible weight. "Vanessa," her father said stiffly, offering no embrace. "You wanted to discuss financial matters." "Please come in," Vanessa replied, stepping aside. "Diana and Christopher haven't arrived yet." Her mother moved forward hesitantly, looking around the grand entrance hall with wide eyes. "The house is beautiful," she offered quietly. "You've done well for yourself." Before Vanessa could respond, Diana's car pulled into the circular driveway. She emerged with her husband Michael, whom Vanessa had only met once, briefly, before the estrangement. Christopher arrived moments later, alone, and looking uncomfortable in a suit that seemed slightly too large for his frame. Vanessa led everyone to the living room, where she had arranged for pre-dinner drinks. The conversation was stilted and superficial, focusing mainly on the house itself. "How exactly did you afford a property like this?" Diana asked, her tone suggesting the question had been burning inside her since she received the invitation. "This must have cost millions." "My last exhibition was very successful," Vanessa answered simply. "And I've made good investments with my earnings." "Always the lucky one," Diana muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Vanessa guided them to the dining room, where she had prepared an elegant meal with the help of a local caterer. The tension around the table was palpable as they took their seats, Richard automatically assuming the head position until Vanessa gently indicated that was her place. As they ate, Vanessa asked polite questions about their lives, noting how they avoided any mention of the family business or their current financial situations. Her father spoke vaguely about consulting work, while Diana described her new position as a lateral move for better work-life balance. Christopher admitted he had recently moved to a smaller apartment to save for the future. When the dessert plates were cleared, Vanessa stood and addressed her family directly for the first time. "I imagine you're wondering why I invited you here tonight," she began. "Diana's email suggested you wanted to discuss financial matters, but before we get to that, I think we need to address what happened 10 years ago." "That's ancient history," her father interrupted. "There's no need to rehash old grievances." "Actually there is," Vanessa said firmly. "Because I recently discovered that what you believe happened isn't what actually occurred." She led them to the study, where her grandmother's documents were displayed. "After you excluded me from the family reunion, I found these among grandmother's possessions." One by one, she handed them copies of Eleanor's journal entries, the correspondence with Harold Jenkins, and finally, the letter explaining her decision regarding the inheritance. "Grandmother changed her will not because I manipulated her, but because she was concerned about the risks Dad was taking with the family business," Vanessa explained. "She wanted to ensure that at least one member of the family would have financial security if those risks didn't pay off." Richard's face flushed with anger. "This is absurd. My mother would never have questioned my business decisions. She knew nothing about modern accounting practices." "Yet she predicted exactly what would happen," Vanessa countered, handing him the letter from Harold warning about the 5 to 7 year timeline for potential business failure. "The Mitchell firm collapsed 8 years after she died, didn't it, Dad?" The color drained from Richard's face as he stared at the letter. Martha began to cry quietly, while Diana and Christopher exchanged shocked glances. "You lost the business," Vanessa continued, her voice steady despite the emotion churning inside her. You had to sell the family home. You're all working for other companies now. Everything grandmother feared would happen did happen. You have no right, Richard began, but his voice lacked its usual authority. I have every right, Vanessa cut in. You accused me of manipulating her. You told me I was dead to you. You excluded me from the family for 10 years because of a narrative that wasn't even true. Diana stood up, her hands shaking slightly. Is this real? She asked, holding up Eleanor's letter. Did Grandma really write this? Harold Jenkins still has the original on file, Vanessa confirmed. He tried to share it with you after the will reading, but Dad refused to look at it. Christopher, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. I suspected something like this, he said quietly. The timing of the business troubles starting right after Grandma died, the way Dad became so controlling about family information. But I was afraid to say anything. Martha wiped her tears and looked directly at Vanessa for the first time. We should have questioned more, she admitted. We should have listened to you. Richard made one last attempt to regain control of the narrative. Whatever your grandmother's reasons, the fact remains that you abandoned the family business when we needed all hands on deck. If you had stayed, things might have turned out differently. No, Dad, Vanessa said gently but firmly. I wasn't responsible for saving a business I never wanted to join. Grandmother knew that forcing me into accounting would have been wrong for everyone. She gave me the chance to follow my own path, which is exactly what I did. Diana approached Vanessa, tears in her eyes. I believed Dad when he said you had manipulated Grandma. I was so angry at you for getting what seemed like special treatment. I never considered there might be another explanation. We all failed you, Christopher added, his voice thick with emotion. We chose to believe what was easier for us, not what might have been true. Richard remained rigid in his chair, but Martha moved to stand beside Vanessa. The business started failing about 3 years after Eleanor died, she explained softly. Richard made some investments that didn't work out, then borrowed heavily to try to recover the losses. By the time we admitted there was a problem, it was too late to save the firm. We had to sell the house last year, Christopher continued. Dad and Mom are renting now. Diana and Michael downsized too. We're all starting over, in a way. Vanessa absorbed this information, seeing her family clearly for perhaps the first time. They weren't villains in her story, just flawed people who had made mistakes and were now suffering the consequences. But their treatment of her had still caused real damage that couldn't be erased with a single evening of revelations. I want to be clear about something, she said, looking at each family member in turn. I didn't invite you here to gloat about my success or your failures. I invited you because for 10 years, I've carried the pain of being cast out of this family based on a lie. If we're going to have any relationship moving forward, it needs to be built on truth and respect, not the dynamics that broke us apart before. Richard finally stood, his composure cracking. What do you want from us, Vanessa? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry we didn't read your grandmother's letter. I'm sorry I was wrong about the business. Is that what you needed to hear? What I need, Vanessa replied calmly, is for you to see me, truly see me, for the first time in my adult life. Not as a disobedient daughter or a threat to your authority, but as a woman who made her own way and honored her grandmother's faith in her. The silence that followed was profound, broken only when Diana stepped forward and embraced Vanessa for the first time in a decade. I see you, she whispered, and I'm so sorry for everything. With the initial confrontation behind them, Vanessa guided her family into a new phase of the evening. The heavy atmosphere gradually lifted as she invited them to tour the mansion and view her artwork properly. This collection represents my journey over the past decade, she explained, leading them through the gallery she had created. Each piece tells part of my story. Diana paused in front of a particularly striking canvas that depicted a woman standing alone on a beach, waves crashing around her feet, her face turned toward a distant horizon. This one is incredible, she said softly. I can feel her determination. That was from my 3rd solo exhibition, Vanessa explained. It sold to a private collector for $20,000, which felt like a fortune at the time. And now, Christopher asked, genuinely curious. My newest pieces start at 6 figures, Vanessa replied without a hint of boasting. The art market can be fickle, but right now, my work is in high demand. She noticed her father lingering in front of a painting she had created during her darkest period, shortly after the estrangement. It showed a family dinner table with one empty chair, the absent person represented only by elongated shadows stretching across the scene. You were always talented, Richard admitted reluctantly. I just never believed you could make a living from it. Few people do succeed in fine arts, Vanessa acknowledged. I was fortunate to find the right mentors and opportunities. But I also worked incredibly hard, often holding 3 jobs while building my portfolio. As they continued the tour, Martha grew more animated, asking questions about Vanessa's techniques and inspirations. I never really looked at your early drawings, she confessed. I was so focused on keeping peace in the family that I missed seeing your gift developing. When they reached Vanessa's studio, with its spectacular views of the property's gardens, Christopher whistled in appreciation. This is the life Grandma Eleanor envisioned for you, isn't it? She would have loved seeing you here. I think of her every day, Vanessa agreed. Especially in this house, which feels connected to our family history in ways I'm still discovering. They returned to the living room, where the conversation inevitably turned to their current financial situations. Diana was the first to broach the subject directly. We didn't just come here to reconcile, though I'm deeply grateful that's happening, she admitted. The truth is, we're all struggling financially since the business failed. Dad and Mom have very little retirement saved, and Michael and I are still paying off debts from trying to help save the firm. Vanessa appreciated her sister's honesty. I suspected as much when you suddenly wanted to discuss financial matters after 10 years of silence. Richard shifted uncomfortably. We're not here for a handout, he insisted, though his expression suggested otherwise. Good, because that's not what I'm offering, Vanessa replied calmly. What I am proposing is a business opportunity that might benefit all of us. She outlined her plan, which she had developed after discovering their financial troubles. I've been considering opening a gallery space here in town, focusing on emerging artists from the region. The mansion has a carriage house that would be perfect for conversion. What I need is someone with business experience to manage the operation while I handle the artistic direction and connections to the New York art world. Diana leaned forward, interest sparking in her eyes. You're offering us jobs? I'm offering a partnership, Vanessa clarified. Dad, your accounting background would be valuable for the financial aspects. Diana, your organizational skills could handle the operational side. Christopher, your people skills would make you an excellent gallery host and sales associate. And what would we need to invest? Richard asked, clearly calculating in his head. Your time and expertise, Vanessa answered. I'll provide the capital for renovation and startup costs. But I need to be clear about something, Dad. If we work together, we're equals. There's no hierarchy where you make unilateral decisions. We operate by consensus, or not at all. Richard's jaw tightened, but after a moment he nodded. That seems reasonable, given the circumstances. There's one more condition, Vanessa added. I need a public acknowledgement from all of you that the story about me manipulating grandmother was false. The people in this town have believed that narrative for 10 years, and it needs to be corrected before we can work together publicly. Martha reached for her husband's hand. We can do that, Richard. We owe Vanessa that much, at least. As they discussed the details of the potential partnership, the doorbell rang. Vanessa excused herself to answer it, returning with Daniel, who had arrived as planned. I'd like you all to meet someone important to me, she said. This is Daniel Matthews, my partner in both life and often in art. He's a curator at the Westfield Gallery in New York. Daniel's warm smile and genuine interest in her family helped ease the remaining tension. He asked thoughtful questions about their lives and shared stories about how he and Vanessa had met, carefully avoiding any mentions of her success that might make them uncomfortable. As the evening drew to a close, Diana asked if she could speak with Vanessa privately. In the study, with the door closed, her sister finally broke down completely. I've been so jealous of you for so long, Diana confessed through tears. First because Grandma seemed to favor you, Then, because you got the inheritance, and finally, because you built this amazing career while our family business crumbled. But seeing you tonight, hearing the truth, I just feel ashamed of how I've treated you. We all made mistakes, Vanessa said, surprised by her own capacity for forgiveness. You believed what Dad told you, which is understandable. But moving forward, I need a sister who sees me clearly and respects my choices. I want that too, Diana replied, wiping her eyes. And I want you to meet my daughter. She's 15 now and showing real interest in art. I've been encouraging her, partly because I've followed your career from a distance even while we were estranged. Christopher caught Vanessa alone next, his approach more awkward but equally sincere. I should have stood up for you, he said simply. I was the peacekeeper in the family, always trying to smooth things over instead of demanding truth. I won't make that mistake again. By the time her family departed, the power dynamic had shifted completely. Vanessa stood on the front steps of Mitchell Mansion, watching their cars disappear down the driveway, no longer the rejected daughter, but a successful woman offering her family a path forward on her terms. Daniel joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. How do you feel? Vindicated, Vanessa replied thoughtfully, but also strangely peaceful. For years, I imagined this confrontation would be all rage and accusations. Instead, it felt like finally putting down a heavy burden I've been carrying for a decade. They saw you tonight, Daniel observed. Really saw you, maybe for the first time? Vanessa nodded, turning back toward the house that symbolized both her success and her heritage. Yes, they did. And surprisingly, I think I finally saw them too. 1 week after the family confrontation, Vanessa met Diana for coffee at a small cafe downtown. Without the pressure of the entire family present, her sister seemed more relaxed, though still carrying an air of apology in her every gesture. I want to explain what happened after you left, Diana began, stirring her latte absently. Not to excuse our behavior, but to help you understand. Over the next hour, Diana revealed the family's downward spiral following Eleanor's death. Richard had indeed made increasingly risky investments, convinced that aggressive expansion was the only way to grow the business in a changing market. When those investments failed, he had borrowed against the family home to cover the losses. Dad became obsessed with salvaging his reputation, Diana explained. The more desperate things got, the more controlling he became. None of us were allowed to discuss the business troubles outside the family. He was convinced he could turn things around if we just worked harder, stayed loyal. Martha had developed severe anxiety and depression as their financial situation deteriorated, often medicating herself to get through social events where they still pretended everything was fine. Christopher had finally left the firm 3 years ago after a major argument with their father about transparency with clients. The worst part was how Dad maintained this fiction about you, Diana continued. He told everyone, including our extended family, that you had manipulated Grandma Eleanor while she was vulnerable. It became this unquestionable family truth. Anyone who suggested reaching out to you was shut down immediately. Did you ever doubt that story? Vanessa asked, trying to keep accusation from her voice. Diana looked down. Sometimes. Especially when I saw your career progressing in the art magazines I'd secretly buy. You seemed so focused, so driven. It didn't match the manipulative person Dad described. But it was easier to believe him than to confront the possibility we had wronged you. Learning how thoroughly her father had controlled the family narrative helped Vanessa understand the dynamics that had kept her isolated for so long. It didn't erase the pain, but it contextualized it, making it more comprehensible. What about the extended family? She asked. Aunts, uncles, cousins? They were told the same story, Diana admitted. Though I think Aunt Louise always had her doubts. She would ask about you occasionally, which always made Dad angry. By the time they parted, Vanessa had agreed to regular coffee meetings with Diana and to meet her niece, Lily, who apparently had inherited the artistic talent that had skipped Diana's generation. 2 days later, Christopher invited Vanessa to lunch. Unlike Diana, who had married and started a family during their estrangement, Christopher had remained single, focusing on rebuilding his career after leaving the family firm. I should have reached out years ago, he said as they sat in a restaurant near his apartment. I knew something wasn't right about Dad's version of events, but I was too cowardly to challenge him directly. Fear isn't the same as cowardice, Vanessa pointed out. Dad has always been intimidating, even before the business troubles. Christopher nodded gratefully at her understanding. Still, I've had to do a lot of reflection on why I stood by while you were cast out. I think part of me was afraid that if I defended you, I'd be next. He explained that their father had become increasingly rigid as the business declined, demanding absolute loyalty from everyone in the family. It was like living under a dictator. We all walked on eggshells, afraid of triggering his anger or disappointment. As they continued meeting with various family members over the following weeks, Vanessa established clear boundaries, particularly with her parents. She agreed to Sunday dinners twice a month, but refused to discuss business matters in that setting. She invited her mother to tour local art galleries with her, but made it clear that her father needed to demonstrate consistent respect before their relationship could truly heal. Richard struggled the most with the new dynamic. Decades of being the unquestioned head of the family had ingrained patterns that were difficult to break. During one tense dinner, he reverted to his authoritative tone when discussing the gallery project. The space needs to be configured efficiently, he declared. I've drawn up plans that maximize the display area while minimizing operational costs. I appreciate your input, Vanessa replied calmly, but as I mentioned, these decisions will be made collaboratively. Daniel and I have extensive experience with gallery layouts that encourage visitor engagement and art sales. Richard's face reddened, but to his credit, he took a deep breath and nodded. Of course. I'd be interested to see your ideas as well. These small moments of adjustment accumulated gradually, reshaping their interactions into something more balanced and healthy. Vanessa found herself reflecting often on how the 10-year absence had changed not just her family, but herself as well. One evening, while Daniel was away at an exhibition opening in Boston, Vanessa walked through the mansion alone, considering how differently her life might have unfolded without the estrangement. Would she have pushed herself so hard to succeed if she hadn't been determined to prove her father wrong? Would her art have developed the emotional depth that critics now praised if she hadn't experienced such profound rejection? The pain had shaped her. There was no denying that. It had forced her to discover her own strength, to build connections outside her family, to define success on her own terms. While she would never be grateful for the hurt, she could acknowledge that it had contributed to the woman she had become. She called Catherine that night to share these reflections. Am I forgiving them too easily? She asked her mentor. Sometimes I worry I'm falling back into old patterns, seeking their approval. There's a difference between forgiveness and foolishness, Catherine replied. You're maintaining your boundaries while allowing for the possibility of healing. That's wisdom, not weakness. Just remember that reconciliation is a process, not an event. Trust needs to be rebuilt slowly. Daniel returned the following day, bringing with him a fresh perspective as someone who had grown up in a relatively healthy family environment. What strikes me about your family, he observed as they prepared dinner together, is how isolation magnified their problems. Your father created this closed system where his version of reality couldn't be challenged. Opening that system up might be the best thing for all of you. Vanessa considered this insight as she planned the next phase of her relationship with her family. If they were going to build something new together, it needed to be based on transparency and open communication, the very qualities that had been missing before. She decided to dedicate a wing of the mansion to community art education, creating a space where local children and adults could take classes and participate in workshops. This public-facing project would prevent the family from slipping back into secretive patterns and would honor Eleanor's belief in making art accessible to everyone. When she proposed this addition to the gallery plan, even Richard expressed genuine enthusiasm. Your grandmother would have loved this, he admitted. She always said art should belong to everyone, not just those who could afford to buy it. As spring arrived, bringing new life to the mansion's gardens, Vanessa found herself increasingly able to release the anger she had carried for so long. It hadn't disappeared completely, sometimes flaring when a particular memory surfaced, but it no longer defined her relationship with her family. Christopher called one evening, his voice excited. "I've been thinking about the education program you proposed. What if we established a scholarship fund in Grandma Eleanor's name for local students who want to pursue arts education but lack the resources?" "That's a wonderful idea," Vanessa replied, touched by how perfectly it honored their grandmother's legacy. "We could fund it partially through gallery proceeds." The conversation left her feeling lighter, as if another piece of the past had been transformed into something healing rather than harmful. She wasn't naive enough to believe that all their problems were solved or that her father had completely changed his controlling nature, but she could see a path forward that included her family without sacrificing her autonomy or self-respect. That night, she wrote a letter to her younger self, the frightened, hurt young woman who had left home with only her grandmother's inheritance and her own determination. She wrote about the struggles and triumphs ahead, about the family that would eventually find their way back to her, and about the strength she would discover within herself. She never intended to send the letter, of course, but the act of writing it helped her connect her past and present selves, acknowledging both the pain and the growth of the intervening years. "You were right to follow your own path," she wrote in conclusion. "And Grandma Eleanor was right to believe in you. The journey hasn't been easy, but it has been yours, and that has made all the difference." 6 months after the confrontation that had reunited the Mitchell family, Vanessa hosted a small dinner party at the mansion. Unlike the tense gathering that had sparked their reconciliation, this evening felt relaxed and genuine. Diana and her husband Michael brought their daughter Lily, who had recently begun taking art lessons from Vanessa on Saturday mornings. Christopher came with his new girlfriend Sarah, whom he had met through the community art program at the mansion. As they gathered around the dining table, the conversation flowed naturally, touching on Lily's progress with watercolors, Christopher's growing confidence in managing the gallery's client relationships, and Diana's ideas for expanding their reach through local partnerships. "I found some of my old sketchbooks in Mom and Dad's storage unit," Diana mentioned as they enjoyed dessert. "I was terrible, but Lily wanted to see them. She said they gave her hope that improvement is possible." Everyone laughed, including Diana, the self-deprecating humor a sign of how far they had come from the defensive posturing of the past. "Speaking of improvement," Christopher added, "the gallery had its best month yet. That series by the local photographer sold completely, and 3 of our emerging artists have been invited to show at the regional exhibition." Vanessa smiled, genuinely pleased by the success of the project they had built together. The Mitchell Gallery had opened 2 months ago in the renovated carriage house, featuring a carefully curated mix of established and emerging artists. The education center occupied the west wing of the mansion, already filled with students of all ages discovering their creative potential. "Aunt Vanessa, can I show Sarah my new painting before dessert?" Lily asked, practically bouncing in her seat with excitement. "Of course," Vanessa replied, touched by the easy way her niece had adopted her as a beloved aunt, bridging the years of separation as only a child could. As Lily led Sarah upstairs to the studio, Diana leaned closer to Vanessa. "I never thanked you properly for offering to teach her. She talks about nothing else all week." "She has real talent," Vanessa said sincerely. The kind Grandma Eleanor would have recognized immediately. Michael, who had been quiet for much of the evening, spoke up. "Diana and I have been discussing the idea of establishing that scholarship in Eleanor's name. We'd like to contribute a portion of our income to help fund it, now that we're back on solid financial ground." The gesture moved Vanessa deeply. Her family wasn't just accepting her path now, they were actively supporting similar opportunities for others. It represented a fundamental shift in values that she hadn't dared hope for. "That would be wonderful," she replied. "Christopher and I have been working on the framework for the scholarship program. We're hoping to offer the first award next fall." Christopher nodded enthusiastically. Sarah's been incredible with the administrative side. Her background in education nonprofit work has been invaluable. Later, as they gathered in the living room for coffee, Vanessa reflected on how naturally they had found new ways to relate to each other as adults, building relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or hierarchy. Her parents had chosen not to attend this particular dinner, which was its own kind of progress, a recognition that the siblings needed space to develop their connections independently. Richard and Martha were slowly finding their places in this new family configuration. Richard had surprised everyone by excelling in the business side of the gallery, his financial acumen proving valuable once separated from his controlling tendencies. Martha had discovered a passion for the educational programs, often assisting with the children's classes and finding her voice in the process. The road hadn't been perfectly smooth. There had been difficult conversations, moments of backsliding into old patterns, painful memories that needed to be acknowledged rather than buried. But with each honest exchange, each boundary respected, each shared success, the wounds of the past continued to heal. After her guests departed, Vanessa stood in the mansion's front hall, looking up at the portrait of Eleanor she had commissioned and hung in place of honor. The artist had captured her grandmother's wisdom and gentle determination perfectly, qualities Vanessa had come to recognize in herself as well. "You were right all along," she whispered to the portrait. "About the business, about my art, about what I needed to become who I am." In her grandmother's foresight, Vanessa had found not just financial security, but also the strength to forge her own path. Eleanor had given her the means to succeed, but Vanessa had done the difficult work herself, building a career and a life she could be proud of. Now, in a twist she could never have predicted, she was using that success to help heal her family and create opportunities for others. The Mitchell mansion had become not a symbol of revenge or superiority, as her family had initially feared, but a place of creation, education, and reconciliation. As she prepared for bed, Vanessa thought about how different her life was now compared to a year ago when she had discovered her exclusion from the family reunion. The pain of that rejection had led to a confrontation that ultimately broke through decades of dysfunction, allowing something healthier to grow in its place. Family, she had learned, could be rebuilt, reformed, and redefined. It required honesty, boundaries, and the courage to face difficult truths, but the reward was relationships based on choice rather than obligation, on mutual respect rather than control. In the morning, she would meet with Richard to discuss the gallery's financial projections, then join Martha and Diana for lunch to plan Lily's birthday celebration. Christopher would stop by in the afternoon to review applications for the gallery's next exhibition. Her chosen family would be there too, Rachel coming to share ideas for a collaborative project, Catherine calling to check on her latest work, Daniel returning from his business trip with stories and suggestions. The life she had built was rich with meaningful connections, purposeful work, and the freedom to define success on her own terms. It wasn't perfect, but it was authentically hers, shaped by both struggle and triumph. What do you think about Vanessa's journey? Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family members to protect your own path? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself can lead to healing. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey, and remember that sometimes the most difficult challenges lead to our greatest growth.